Alaska is often called the last frontier, a place of endless skies and untouched wilderness. It is breathtaking, vast, and wild, but beneath its beauty lies a chilling truth. This is not just land. It is a labyrinth where silence swallows voices. Trails vanish into shadows. Every year, countless hikers step into its forests and mountains and never return. Their names are etched into reports, their stories whispered among locals, but their bodies are rarely found. Some say Alaska doesn't just take lives, it keeps them hidden in places no search team can reach, guarded by forces no map can chart. The disappearances follow no pattern, no logic, and yet they feel connected, like pieces of a puzzle designed to remain unsolved. Tonight, we step into that puzzle, beginning with the first story of a skilled explorer who walked into the wilderness and never came back. Alaska is more than a place on the map. It is a presence, a living force that feels both eternal and untamable, stretching across glaciers that shine like broken glass under the sun and forests so thick the daylight struggles to break through. It offers beauty that can disarm even the most cautious traveler. The air here is crisp, almost sharp, carrying with it the scent of pine and the unshakable reminder that this land has existed long before us and will remain long after we are gone. But within that beauty is a kind of silence that unsettles the human mind. It's not the ordinary quiet of a forest at dusk. It's heavier, more oppressive, as if the land itself is listening. Hikers often describe how time feels different here, how footsteps echo strangely against the rocks, how the stillness grows so deep that even the sound of their own breathing begins to feel out of place. It is in this silence that Alaska shows its darker side, reminding us that here, man is not the master, but the intruder. For centuries, locals have whispered about the strange pull of these landscapes. Hunters, trappers, and seasoned guides, all people who knew how to read the wilderness, have told stories of unease, of feeling followed though no one was there, of catching glimpses of shapes in the trees that never fully revealed themselves. These are not the tales of amateurs unprepared for the cold. They are the words of men and women who lived their lives in Alaska's embrace and still spoke of its wilderness with a cautious reverence, as if addressing something alive. The modern world tends to dismiss such stories as exaggerations, paranoia triggered by exhaustion, hunger, or the sheer immensity of isolation. But then the records appear. Names upon names of those who vanished in the Alaskan wilds, stretching back decades, even centuries. Some disappearances can be explained away: sudden storms, wild animals, or fatal missteps on icy cliffs. Yet so many others defy reason. Trails cut off without warning. Campsites found abandoned, food untouched, boots left behind. Not a single footprint leading away. It is as though the earth itself had opened up and swallowed its guests whole. This is why Alaska is not simply dangerous, it is uncanny. It does not behave like other wildernesses. Its vanishings are not just accidents. They are patterns, ripples in the quiet surface of its mountains and valleys that seem to repeat decade after decade, as if scripted by an unseen hand. And when people talk of Alaska's dangers, they do so with a tone that blurs the line between survival advice and whispered superstition. Because in this land, reality and legend merge into something indistinguishable. And for the hikers who step into its silence, the line between the two can mean the difference between returning or becoming just another name added to Alaska's long, unyielding list of the missing. And it is with that chilling truth that we arrive at the first case, the story of a skilled explorer whose experience should have protected him, but whose trail ended in nothing but silence. Our first story begins with a man who knew the wilderness better than most. He was not a tourist, not a reckless thrill-seeker, but a seasoned explorer, an experienced hiker who had spent years mapping trails and guiding others through Alaska's unforgiving terrain. To his friends and family, he was the kind of person least likely to fall victim to the land. He prepared meticulously, checked weather forecasts, packed survival gear, and carried the calm confidence of someone who had walked these trails many times before. And yet, it was precisely this man who vanished in a way that still defies explanation. The day began without incident. He signed into the trailhead logbook, noting the time of his departure, and left behind his vehicle parked neatly in the gravel lot. Other hikers would later recall seeing him on the path, walking with steady strides, nodding politely as he passed. He carried no sign of distress, no hesitation in his pace. But after that moment, he ceased to exist in the eyes of the world. When he failed to return by evening, the alarm was raised quickly. Authorities, well accustomed to rescues in the region, organized search teams almost immediately. Helicopters combed the ridges, dogs sniffed the trails, and dozens of volunteers fanned out across the wilderness. But there was nothing. No broken branches, no drop pack, no scattered gear to suggest a fall or attack. Even the dogs lost the trail abruptly, as if his scent simply ended in thin air. This, perhaps, is what made his disappearance so haunting. In wilderness rescues, there are usually clues: a torn jacket, a boot print, a sign of struggle. Here, there was only silence, an absence so complete it felt unnatural. Days stretched into weeks and hope began to fade. The trail remained, his car untouched, his belongings waiting at home. But the man himself had become part of Alaska's growing ledger of the lost. Theories, of course, emerged. Some suggested he must have slipped into a hidden crevasse, swallowed by ice where no rescuer could see. Others believed he was mauled and carried off by wildlife, though the lack of blood or remains contradicted this. A few whispered darker possibilities that he had staged his own disappearance, choosing to vanish from society forever. Yet none of these explanations sat comfortably with those who knew him. He had been content, grounded, not a man running from life. He had been running towards something else, the wilderness itself. Locals, however, told a different story. They spoke of certain areas where the land feels different, where even the most seasoned guides hesitate to linger. Places where compasses spin strangely and where voices seem to echo from nowhere. To them, the explorer's disappearance was not an accident. It was another chapter in a much older pattern, one written long before his boots touched the trail. What makes this case especially chilling is the precision with which it unfolded. He did everything right, yet still vanished without leaving the faintest trace. If a skilled explorer can disappear so completely, then what does that say about the rest of us, those less prepared, less aware of the land's hidden dangers? And this is where the unease deepens. Because if Alaska can swallow a man like him, perhaps it chooses who it takes. Perhaps skill and preparation mean nothing when the land itself decides you are not meant to return. This is only the beginning. Because, as haunting as one disappearance may be, Alaska holds stories even more unsettling, entire groups of hikers who vanished together, leaving behind a mystery far greater than one man lost to the silence. Disappearances in Alaska are not new. Long before official reports, long before rescue helicopters cut across the sky, the indigenous peoples of this land told stories, warnings whispered through generations. To them, the wilderness was not just a backdrop for survival, it was alive. And sometimes it called to travelers in voices only they could hear among the Tlingit. There are tales of the Kushtaka, shape-shifting beings that appear as familiar faces or lost companions, luring wanderers deeper into the trees. Once followed, the person is said to vanish forever, taken to a realm from which no human returns. Hunters spoke of hearing their names carried in the wind, in voices belonging to loved ones who were miles away. Few dared answer. Other stories speak of shadow figures seen along riverbanks at dusk, tall, silent forms that disappear when approached. Trappers claimed they moved against the current, as if gliding just beneath the surface. Some who saw them were later found wandering the forest in a daze, unable to explain what had pulled them from the trail. Others were never found at all. Even modern witnesses echo these ancient fears. In interviews, seasoned outdoorsmen recall nights when the forest grew unnaturally still, when the crack of a twig sounded deliberate, not accidental. One hiker described seeing faint orbs of light weaving between the trees, only to realize the orbs seemed to grow brighter the further off-trail he went. He resisted the urge to follow and swears that choice saved his life. Search and rescue teams, too, share strange accounts. Some report hearing faint shouts during missions, only for the voices to fade as they drew closer. Others find boot prints leading off-trail continuing for several yards, before stopping dead, as though the person simply dissolved into thin air. These are the moments that statistics cannot explain, the fragments that bridge the gap between folklore and fact. Skeptics argue these tales are illusions born from stress and exhaustion, and yet the sheer number of such accounts is difficult to ignore. They overlap across cultures and centuries, weaving a tapestry of unease that suggests something larger at play. Even the most rational minds sometimes admit there are parts of Alaska that feel different, heavy, watchful. What makes this folklore especially haunting is how well it aligns with the cold reality of missing persons. The Kushtaka's lures, the orbs in the woods, the vanishing footprints, each has its mirror in real reports of hikers who never came back. Coincidence, perhaps? But to those who live here, it feels like Alaska's secrets are merely wearing new names, and so the line between myth and memory blurs. The locals do not ask whether people vanish here, they ask what takes them. Is it the land itself, ancient and hungry? Is it something unseen, playing with those who dare to walk too far? The explorer we spoke of earlier was only one man, one story swallowed by silence. But Alaska has claimed more than lone travelers. Sometimes entire groups walk into its wilderness together, and not a single one of them returns. If one man vanishing without a trace is unsettling, then what happens when an entire group disappears together? The human mind instinctively resists the possibility. We tell ourselves that there must be an explanation. Groups provide safety, accountability, witnesses. And yet, in Alaska, even numbers do not guarantee survival. One such case still echoes through the region, a mystery that baffles experts and terrifies locals to this day. It began with 5 hikers, friends in their 30s, all familiar with the outdoors, all well prepared. They had planned their trip months in advance, mapping their route, packing enough supplies to last twice as long as they intended to stay. They weren't reckless adventurers. They were deliberate, methodical, and eager for the kind of breathtaking solitude only Alaska could provide. The trail they chose was remote but not unheard of, winding through dense forest before opening into a valley surrounded by jagged peaks. For the first 2 days, everything went according to plan. Journal entries and camera photos later recovered revealed smiling faces, scenic views, and even notes about the weather being perfect. But on the 3rd day, contact ceased. No more photos, no calls, nothing. When they failed to check in as scheduled, search teams mobilized quickly. What they found was stranger than anyone expected. At the base of the valley, the hikers' campsite remained intact. The tents were standing, unzipped as though casually left. Sleeping bags were unrolled. Food sat neatly in containers, half prepared, as if dinner had been interrupted. Their packs were there, along with water bottles, maps, and extra clothes. Everything a group of hikers would need was accounted for, except the hikers themselves. Tracks were visible around the site, but they offered no clarity. The footprints led outward, scattered in different directions, some stopping abruptly in the grass, others circling back as if the group had been confused or disoriented. None of the prints showed signs of panic, no running strides, no scuffles, no blood. It was as if the group had calmly stood up from their meal, walked a short distance, and dissolved into the wilderness, Rescue efforts intensified. Helicopters swept the valley. Dogs scoured the area. Searchers shouted until their voices cracked, but no response ever came. No bodies, no gear hidden in the brush, no trail leading away. Just emptiness. Theories emerged, each less satisfying than the last. Some claimed the group may have succumbed to sudden hypothermia, wandering off in a delirious state known as paradoxical undressing. But the weather was mild, their clothes were found in place, and hypothermia would not have erased all 5 simultaneously. Others suggested an avalanche, but there was no evidence of snowslides that season. Predators were considered, but no signs of attack, no drag marks, no torn fabric were ever found. Then came the stranger theories. A military testing zone gone wrong, a sinkhole or hidden cave that swallowed them. Or perhaps, as the locals whispered, the land itself called to them in unison, an invisible pull no one could resist. What makes this case uniquely terrifying is not only the absence of answers, but the absence of struggle. 5 people, healthy and aware, did not vanish violently. They vanished quietly, seamlessly, like the wilderness absorbed them without resistance. That calmness is what lingers, the impression that whatever happened, it did not need to fight for them. Years later, hikers still pass through that valley. Some say they feel watched there, that the silence is heavier, thicker than anywhere else. A few refuse to camp at all, claiming that once night falls, the valley feels alive in a way no human should trust. If Alaska can erase 5 souls without leaving a trace, then perhaps the wilderness is not simply dangerous, it is deliberate. And when vanishings begin to repeat in patterns this eerie, people start to wonder whether they are looking at accidents, or at something designed, and that is where the whispers converge, on a place infamous for disappearances where statistics climb beyond reason, and where the missing are counted not in handfuls, but in thousands. It is known simply as the Alaska Triangle. If isolated vanishings disturb us, the broader pattern chills us to the bone, because these cases are not rare, nor are they scattered randomly across Alaska. Instead, they seem to cluster within a vast swath of land locals and researchers alike now call the Alaska Triangle. Stretching from Juneau in the southeast, up through Barrow in the north, and down to Anchorage in the west, this triangle covers some of the most rugged and remote wilderness on Earth. But it is also where disappearances multiply at an alarming rate. Since 1988, over 16,000 people have been reported missing within Alaska, a state with one of the lowest population densities in the United States. Statistically, that means people vanish here at twice the national average. And within the boundaries of the triangle, those disappearances grow even more concentrated, as though something unseen draws victims into its center. The vanishings do not belong solely to hikers. Small planes flying clear days with experienced pilots have simply never landed. Boats with entire crews have failed to return to port, with no wreckage or radio distress call ever discovered. Even military aircraft have been lost, swallowed by radar blackouts that offer no explanation. In some cases, the missing total dozens at once, their absence echoing across communities with no answer, no closure. Skeptics argue that Alaska's landscape itself explains the losses. The weather changes suddenly, turning blue skies into storms in minutes. The jagged mountains and endless forests can conceal wreckage for decades. And indeed, nature plays its part. But for many, these explanations fall short. Because even if treacherous terrain can account for some disappearances, can it account for all of them? Can it account for the lack of debris, the lack of remains, the sheer silence that follows? The unsettling truth is that the Alaska Triangle has earned comparisons to the Bermuda Triangle, with theories just as varied and bizarre. Some point to magnetic anomalies said to interfere with compasses and navigation, leading travelers astray. Others whisper about secret government experiments buried deep in the wilderness. And of course, there are those who believe the cause lies far beyond human understanding, something not of this world lurking in the icy expanse. Yet the most haunting possibility is also the simplest. Perhaps the land itself is the culprit. Vast, unforgiving, and patient, it waits for those who enter unprepared, or even those who are. A force of nature that erases without trace, leaving only questions behind. As the disappearances pile higher, so too does the unease. Because within this triangle, no one is truly safe. Not the skilled explorer, not the united group, not even entire aircraft. And if the land can claim so many without explanation, the question grows unavoidable. Does it choose who disappears and why? To glimpse that answer, we must look to one of the most unsettling cases of all. A man who not only understood the wilderness, but warned others about it until inevitably it took him too. Among the countless disappearances in Alaska, one story carries a weight that feels different. It is the story of a man who not only lived his life in the wilderness but also spent years warning others about it. He was a seasoned guide, respected by both locals and visitors alike. His name became synonymous with survival. If anyone understood the dangers of Alaska, it was him. Yet, in the end, the very land he feared most claimed him too, quietly, completely, and without a trace. He had led dozens of expeditions through Alaska's treacherous terrain. His clients described him as calm, cautious, and almost unnervingly aware of his surroundings. Around campfires, he would tell stories not to frighten, but to prepare. He spoke of strange feelings one might encounter on certain trails, of sudden silences that felt unnatural, of places where even he, with his decades of experience, refused to linger. His warnings often unsettled new hikers. He told them never to follow voices they might hear in the distance, never to chase unexplained lights, and never to stray from the group, no matter how inviting a side path might seem. Some laughed these warnings off as superstition, but his tone carried a seriousness that silenced most. It was as though he knew something he could not fully explain, something that weighed on him every time he returned to the wild. In his final year, those warnings grew more urgent. Journal entries later recovered from his cabin revealed a shift in his thinking. He wrote of feeling watched on solo trips, of seeing figures standing at the tree line only to vanish when approached. He described dreams of being pulled deeper into the forest, dreams that felt less like imagination and more like memories of something waiting. Then came his last expedition. He set out alone, intending to map a remote stretch of wilderness he had often avoided. Friends urged him not to go, reminding him of his own warnings, but he insisted it would be quick, routine, safe. He left with full gear, a working radio, and a plan known to several people. And then, like so many before him, he disappeared. When search teams retraced his route, they found his camp in perfect order. A fire pit was stacked neatly with wood, his pack rested against a tree, and his journal lay open, as if he had been writing before stepping away. The final words in his entry read, "It's closer now. I hear it even when I don't want to." Beyond that, nothing. Despite weeks of searching, not a shred of evidence was uncovered. No footprints leading away, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle. The man who had warned others for years about the strange pull of Alaska's land had himself been consumed by it. For locals, his disappearance was more than another statistic. It felt like confirmation that those who spend enough time here eventually meet the same fate. Some whispered that he knew too much, that the land had been waiting for him specifically. Others believed his warnings weren't superstition, but survival strategies he himself had barely managed to resist until the very end. And so his story remains a haunting reminder. Knowledge and experience offer no guarantee in Alaska. The wilderness does not care how many years you've walked its paths. When it decides to take, it takes. But what exactly is behind these vanishings? Nature's cruelty? Human error? Or something far stranger, far older, hiding in plain sight? To answer that, we must peel back the layers of speculation, moving from the rational to the inexplicable, into the realm of theories that attempt to explain the unexplainable. When faced with mysteries as unsettling as Alaska's vanishings, the human mind grasps for answers. We cannot accept silence. We crave explanation. And over the years, countless theories have been proposed, some grounded in science, others stretching into the uncharted edges of belief. Together they form a spectrum of possibilities, each more chilling than the last. The most common explanation points to nature itself. Alaska's terrain is as unforgiving as it is beautiful. Sudden snowstorms can appear in minutes, reducing visibility to nothing. Glaciers conceal deep crevasses large enough to swallow a person whole, never to be seen again. Wildlife, bears, wolves, and moose roam freely, capable of killing without warning. To many experts, these dangers alone are enough to explain why hikers vanish without a trace. But even here, doubt lingers. Nature leaves evidence, tracks, clothing, blood, remains. Yet, in case after case, there is only absence. Another theory suggests criminal activity. Remote trails can attract opportunists, people who take advantage of Alaska's vast isolation. With little law enforcement presence in the backcountry, foul play is always possible. But this fails to account for the sheer number of cases and for groups who vanish together without leaving signs of violence or theft. Criminal intent may explain a handful of disappearances, but not the staggering scale of the mystery. Others turn to the military. Alaska has long been home to secret testing facilities and classified operations. Whispers circulate of advanced technology interfering with compasses or of underground bases concealed in mountain ranges. Could travelers have stumbled into restricted zones only to be silenced forever? It is plausible, perhaps, but such theories remain speculation, fueled by secrecy and the human tendency to link what we cannot see with what we most fear. Beyond these rational ideas lie the stranger theories, ones that blur the line between science and myth. Some point to magnetic anomalies documented within the Alaska Triangle. Compasses spinning wildly, GPS devices failing without explanation, pilots reporting bizarre instrument readings before losing contact. Could these distortions pull travelers off course, or even distort reality itself? And then there are the truly paranormal explanations. Stories of portals, gateways, and unseen forces that lure the unwary deeper into the land. Witnesses describe orbs of light dancing in the forest, whispers in voices that sound familiar yet impossible, and the unnerving sensation of being followed by something that never appears. Indigenous legends of shapeshifters and shadow figures suddenly seem less like folklore and more like warnings preserved through time. Of course, skeptics dismiss these ideas as products of fear, fatigue, or imagination. But the unnerving truth is that no single theory can explain it all. The vanishings span decades, terrains, and circumstances too varied to fit into one tidy box. Each explanation solves a piece of the puzzle while leaving the rest unsolved, and perhaps that is the true horror. Because if these disappearances cannot be explained by storms, by crime, by animals, or even by science, then what remains? Are we forced to consider that something older, something we cannot name, lies beneath Alaska's silence? It is here, in this uncertainty, that the terror grows strongest. For when we admit we do not know, we are left with only reflection on why humans are drawn to such dangerous places and why some never return. Which leads us to the deeper question. Not just how people vanish, but why the wilderness itself seems to consume them. Why do we go where we know we might never return? This is the question Alaska forces us to confront. For centuries, human beings have been drawn to the edges of the world, the peaks too high to climb, the oceans too vast to cross, and the forests too deep to map. The call of the unknown has always whispered to us. But in Alaska, that call seems louder, sharper, almost personal. The wilderness here is not just scenery, it is a mirror. It reflects back the fragility of our lives, the thin thread that keeps us tethered to safety. To walk its trails is to feel both infinite and insignificant at once. For some, that contradiction becomes irresistible. They enter the forests to test themselves, to prove that they can endure what others cannot. But the truth is darker. Alaska does not care about endurance. It swallows the strong and the weak alike. What unsettles us most is how selective the disappearances seem. Thousands enter Alaska's backcountry every year. Many return carrying only stories of awe and beauty. But others, just a few, never come back. Why them? Why those moments, those people, on those trails? The randomness gnaws at us. If it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. Perhaps that is Alaska's cruelest lesson. The wilderness chooses and it does not explain. Psychologists say part of our fascination comes from this very uncertainty. The mind clings to mysteries it cannot solve. We replay them, searching for patterns where there are none, imagining explanations in the dark corners of silence. For viewers and storytellers alike, these vanishings become more than tragedies. They become symbols of everything unknowable, everything just out of reach. And in that way, Alaska itself becomes a myth. But beneath the myth lies a more haunting thought. Maybe the vanishings are not anomalies at all. Maybe they are the natural outcome of a place never meant to be tamed. We like to believe that the world belongs to us, mapped and measured, conquered and claimed. Yet Alaska reminds us that some places do not yield, that some silences cannot be broken. The land does not need to explain itself. It simply is, and so we are left with reflection. What drives a person to step into a forest where others have vanished? Is it courage or something closer to surrender? Perhaps on some level those who disappear are answering a call the rest of us refuse to hear. Perhaps they do not vanish by accident but by invitation. That possibility lingers because it shifts the story from tragedy to something more profound. If Alaska consumes, maybe it does so not out of cruelty but out of inevitability. A reminder that the wilderness is greater than us and that in its presence we are never in control. And so we end where we began, with silence. Because silence is what Alaska leaves behind. The unanswered questions, the empty trails, the families who wait for closure that never comes. But the silence is also what keeps us listening, keeps us wondering, and keeps us returning to stories like these. And as we approach the end of this journey, we must face the final, unshakable truth. For every mystery told, there are countless more hidden in the snow, the trees, and the shadows of Alaska's endless wild. Alaska is a place of paradox, breathtaking and brutal, magnetic and merciless. Its mountains rise like ancient guardians, its forests stretch into eternity, and its silence speaks louder than any storm. But within that silence lies the truth we cannot ignore. People come here, and some never return. They vanish into a wilderness that offers no clues, no mercy, and no answers. The stories we've shared are not legends. They are the echoes of real lives, real families left with questions that may never be resolved. Each disappearance adds another layer to Alaska's mystery, until the land itself feels like a living puzzle, one designed to remain unsolved. And maybe that is the point. Because what lingers most is not just fear, but fascination. We fear what the land can take, yet we are drawn to it, compelled by its beauty, hypnotized by its mystery. Perhaps that is why these tales endure, because they force us to reflect on the fragile line between safety and silence. As you sit in the comfort of your own space, far from those mountains and forests, one question remains. If you stepped into Alaska's wilderness, would you return? Or would you become another name whispered among the missing, another story swallowed by the land that does not give back what it takes? The silence waits, and it never stops listening.